what's the most serious one? Let's get that one planned first, and then the next one. And so you work your way through that. So you kind of work your way around the chart. And then the second thing you want to do are things that are very likely to happen but have less impact. So you kind of think about, okay, the things that are likely to happen tomorrow until you get down to this bottom left, which is low frequency and low significance. And those are the kinds of things as you eat this elephant that you'll eat last. And that's why I say to you, and I said it earlier, is that when you build an emergency response plan or whatever you want to call it, it's a work in progress. It's never done. Right? And you may find that some of the risks and some of the impacts change. Maybe something changes in the community that changes the likelihood of a problem. Maybe you have no railroad tracks in your community, right? And then they decide to put one through there and it has a malfunctioning gate. Well, that changes where it sits on things. So be flexible with this stuff, but that's how you order what you're going to work on first. So let's couple procedural things. Good crisis planning, which is what we're doing. Every one of these problems fits that one chart that we had up here that says, is this a crisis? So it's things that take your attention. They could disrupt the normal routine. They take teamwork. And then once we've prioritized and we figure out what we're going to work on, for each problem, you have to answer some questions. And those questions are partially listed here on this board, but what we have to do is figure out, okay, what do we have to do first? Right? So that's always with any problem, what do we have to do first? And then what resources might we need to bring this problem to closure or make it go away? Who do we need to tell? So this who do we need to tell thing could have a couple layers to that onion, right? If it's a bus crash with injury, who do we tell first? 911 dispatch, right? And then superintendent needs to know. But who else is pretty high in that need to know thing? Yeah. And so now we got to think about, how do we tell them? Is that you pulling out the bus roster and making phone calls? Sometimes. Or is there someone else in the district that might be better positioned than you to do that work for you? Right? Oftentimes, we might want to lean on the school building itself. What leadership roles are needed? So here's an interesting predicament. It's not uncommon when I go out and work with supervisors and talk to them about what their emergency plan is, and I say, well, let's talk about a bus crash. What happens in a bus crash? And it's pretty common that the supervisor says, well, I hop in my car and I go there. Right? Probably some of you, that's your response too. But for you to hop in your car and go there, who manages the rest of the game? You know, if Alex walks off the set in the middle of Double Jeopardy, who's going to interact with the three contestants for the rest of the game? So here's where the planning part comes to the table. It might be that you need to go to the scene, but if you're going to go to the scene and manage a bus crash, who's going to cover the telephone, the radio, and the other routes? You have one bus involved in a crash, but if you're running 45 routes, there's 44 other buses that have to keep going. And we can't say to all of them, okay, just stop where you are, wait. We'll let you know when it's okay to move again, right? Does that work well? Not really. All right, so part of this whole planning thing is to figure out, where do you fit? Are you better off at the scene? Are you better off inside calling the shots. Right? And I don't know that there's a right or a wrong answer to that. I'm just going to challenge you to ask that question on every one of these problems as we start to build our plans.
We just had a really good example of this. It wasn't my district, next door neighbor district. They had a fender bender in a tight neighborhood. You turn in a corner, 25 miles an hour, cars at the stop sign. The bus misjudges, tail end hits the car. The rescue squad shows up and the media is there and puts out that 13 kids are taken to the hospital. There were 48 kids on the bus. All the parents went to the hospital. They thought there were only 13 kids and their kid was one of them. So they had another bus come, take the kids and continue the route. So now we're dropping kids off at houses where there's no parents and didn't know. It was just thankfully everybody was okay, but what a learning experience, and to make sure your media people converse with you before they put out notification or put it on the news or whatever.
Yeah, so I will tell you, as both as a school district administrator and as a former emergency services officer, the two nightmares on every scene, actually it's the one nightmare on every scene by all parties, is mom and dad. All right? They will come first and they will try and get their child back. The media follows behind, but I will tell you that the media is actually easier to manage than parents. And if you ever have the opportunity, and I hope you do, to do one of these training sessions, I want you to make sure, I'm just going to hand some and let you pass them down. How's that? I want you to make sure that you get some bus drivers to act as parents and have them show up in the middle of the crash and let them start trying to get their kids out. Because that will happen every single time. And that's just that one scenario. If something happens at the building, and principals know this really, really well. Anything happens in the building and gets on the news, guess what just happened to the front driveway? Right? It's lined up 3 blocks away with people trying to get there. And at some point they get out of their cars and they start walking up to the front door, and it's a disaster. So we've talked about the process. We've talked about problem development. Now, how do we solve these problems? I like to use that form that I just put in front of you, and I've used this with other districts when I help them planning. And I use one of these for each problem on the chart. And so what you do is you decide as a group, what problem are you going to work on? And then if you work your way down through this chart, so let's just understand what's on here. First, we identify what's the problem. Problem number is not important now, but after you're done and you filled out maybe 15 or 20 of these things, you might choose to start numbering them and figuring out how you put them in order. The team members, so those are the stakeholders, right? So you write down the names of the stakeholders that are working with you. And then B and C is that rank ordering thing. How likely is this to happen? And if it's high likelihood, happens on a weekly basis, that's what you write down there. Is this life-threatening? Now, my bias on severity, when I say high severity, is it life-threatening? And that comes from many years working as a firefighter and EMS person. We always look at life hazards first, and then we look at property hazards. When we did the sorting here, what I said to you is how much impact does it have? It's just a different way of looking at the same problem. So it might be over here where you guys have 4 things that are high impact. Maybe you could help sort them out by saying which one of these has the most risk to someone's life. Right? And we always do life first and then property. What are the key elements of the problem? So every problem's got some different parts to it. So we talk about a bus crash with possible injury. So what are the key elements? Well, we got a broken bus, right? We got students that may or may not need medical help. What's another key element? We got some other students that need to continue the route. Agreed? What's another element of the problem? We got the rest of the fleet to manage, right? And there's probably half a dozen other things in there, and each one of you could, for each one of your problems, fill in your own thing. What are the resources? So, again, bus crash with injury. What resources do we need to solve that? Well, if it's maybe an injury, what's the first resource we call? So, good, EMS. What else might we need? A tow. What else might we need? Spare bus. What else might we need? Another driver. What else might we need? I almost heard that. What? Drug testing. Okay, that's kind of phase 2. So some things are first, some things are second. For me, something we need early on this is somebody start making phone calls, right? Because I don't want to spend the rest of the afternoon calling houses when I should be managing. What else might we need? So as we move more away from immediate, we finish the immediate things. Now there's some follow-up things. So who else do we have to get involved if there was damage to a bus? Insurance, the treasurer. State Patrol, yep. All right. F, who should be notified? There's really 2 parts to F. Who should be notified during the problem? And who should be notified after the problem? So we kind of did some of that, right? Where do you put your boss in that rank? At the top? Yep. All right. So now here's this last one, and here's why I wanted to talk this through before I turn you loose on this chart. Who should roles be defined for? So let me help with your understanding on this. There's one role that we just talked about. Who goes to the scene and represents the school district? Okay, is it you? Is it an assistant? Is it a business manager? Is it the superintendent? Is it the head mechanic? Think of it as a role and not as a person. So one role would be, let's just call it scene response. Who goes there to represent the district? What would another role be? The communicator. Yep, in charge of resources. What would another role be? If you took the role of scene responder, do you want somebody back at the office running the rest of the fleet for you? So you need whether you call it dispatcher, office manager, route supervisor, whatever, that's a role, right, that has to be filled. Right? So that's what you have to do a role for. After the problem, well, who else could we have roles for? Yeah. Who's going to interact with the parents? And so that could be building staff. And so you could subdivide that communicator's role into, all right, here's a person that's going to get us the wrecker, the bus, the driver, whatever resources we need. Here's another person who's going to coordinate communicating with the parents, the PIO, right? The press. Right? However big your district is, you might subdivide things a little bit. Or if you're a small district, sometimes one person wears 5 hats. After the crash, a week later, are there additional roles that pop up? Like what? Okay, so we have a fiscal role where somebody's got to manage the repairs and the reporting and the legal liabilities. And that includes letting the MVI team know you had a bus involved, filing the report with ODE, letting the insurance man know. All right. Is there another role post-crash? Some of you do it, and you don't even think of it as a role. What about accident investigation? How many of you have a post-accident review process? If you do, good. If you don't, you're missing an opportunity. And to be real clear, the intent of a post-accident review is not driver discipline. The intent of a post-accident review is to figure out what happened, why did it happen, how do we stop it from happening again? So that's back where we started. Was it preventable? And if it was preventable, how do we do that? Okay. So your post-accident review, and by the way, National Safety Council has a great handbook for supervisors. I'd encourage you to do whatever you can to find a copy of that, buy it, borrow it, copy it. You'll find one in the Winton Woods office. In fact, you'll find 5 of them. It's called Preventable or Not. And it's a great exercise for drivers. It sets up a crash scene, talks about what happened, how it happened, and then you have questions to answer afterwards, trying to figure out, was this preventable or not? That's different from saying, was the bus driver at fault? Okay. It's a very important difference. Okay. What we're trying to figure out is, was it preventable? So that's a role that should happen with almost any crisis. Decide if I want to do the exercise first or the next group first. Let's do the exercise first. So each one of you in your groups, and I have a bunch more of these green sheets, so I'll lay them on the back table, so if you want blank ones to take home with you. And you don't have to do these all together as a group, but if 2 of you sitting next to each other, pick one problem on your chart, and I want you to have it go at filling out the green sheet. So pick one of the problems on your chart. Again, if you want to collaborate, that's fine. If you want to do it on your own, that's fine too. Pick one of your problems. Make it one that could happen in your district and work your way through filling out the sheet. I would ask you to pick something that's in the high block on your prioritization chart. Looks like you guys get weather, right? It's raining coronavirus.